Do you live in Bolton?
Yeah, it's a home office.
Oh, home office. Yay, ooh, yay. Yeah. Anyway, so Betty's going to share with us her work at Lifewater Canada. And of course, there's going to be time for questions. Can they interrupt you with questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. She's pretty fun going. Don't be too hard on her. Hey, John? Okay, sorry. Okay, I'm going to go turn your mic off. And we are live feeding if anybody wants to watch us later. Woo. All right.
Are we good? Good morning. Thank you for welcoming me here to your beautiful church. What a fantastic historic building in such a lovely environment. I'm going to spend about half an hour talking about water needs around the world and about the work that we do at Lifewater Canada. As Reverend Jan said, please do ask questions as we go along. For sure, I'll open the floor for questions at the end, but if you have a question as I'm speaking, I absolutely love to answer. So please, raise your hand or call out or jump up and down or whatever you prefer to do. And if I'm speaking too quickly or if the mic is not working and you're not hearing me, please let me know. There's nothing worse than talking for 30 minutes and then having someone come and say, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you were saying. So I would love for this to be a little bit interactive. Lifewater Canada is an organization that's been around for almost 30 years now. And we drill wells, do water and sanitation programs in Africa and Haiti. And we work with a very small Canadian team that's spread across Ontario. So as I said, I live right in the neighborhood really in Bolton, Ontario, and work from my home there. As we get started though, I wanted you to stop and think about water for a moment. I'm sure everybody has used some water this morning. What did you use water for today? Go ahead and call it out. You had a shower, drinking, what else? Coffee or tea, no kidding. We flushed the toilet. Yeah. Laundry, yeah, I had my machine going this morning. Absolutely. We know that we all use a phenomenal amount of water, and I'm guessing that your house is a whole lot like mine in that we're probably never more than a few steps from a faucet. And the bottom line is that water is life. Humans cannot live without water. The statistics are very sad. As we know, there are billions of people in the world who do not have safe access to water. This is a community in Nigeria where Lifewater worked recently. It was a community, or is a community, of 320 people. And for them, accessing water is a 30-minute walk. So a 30-minute walk to a water source, that looks like this. Generally, they collect water in buckets that are about 5 gallons. 5 gallons is 40 pounds. So think about a small child. Carry that 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back. And as you can see, the water that they're carrying is an extremely unsafe water source. Here's another picture of where they were collecting their water. This kind of water source often leads to what they call in Africa running stomach, which is diarrhea, which can be fatal if not treated properly. So here are some of the statistics. There's about 2 billion people in the world who lack access to safe water. About 1 in every 4 people on this planet is drinking water that's contaminated with feces. And the sad fact is that someone, usually a child, dies every 35 seconds from a waterborne illness. So we haven't been here very long yet, but take a look at your watch. I don't know what time it is, maybe 10 after 11. Maybe 20 kids have died since you walked in this building. It's a really sobering statistic. Hauling water disproportionately affects women and girls. So traditionally, in Africa and Haiti, these communities, it is the women and girls who do the bulk of the water carrying. And as you can imagine, if you're a young girl and you're spending hours a day collecting water, what's that going to impact? Not going to school, you're exactly right. So it affects your education. So you can see how it leads to a downward spiral, right? Your health is affected, your ability to go to school is affected, your ability to earn a living is affected. In addition, we recently discovered over the last few years that there were some communities in Kenya where we were drilling wells so girls were able to go to school, and we're really watching the statistics carefully. And then we realized, wait a minute, they're still missing time in school. About 1 week a month, these girls aren't going to school. What's happening? Any guesses? It's period poverty, right? So when girls don't have access to the products that they need during menstruation, they're staying home. They're using old mattresses, they're using banana leaves, they're staying home sitting on sand. So it's really a combination of water, sanitation, and hygiene, those three things that come together that really can lift communities up out of poverty, right? You can start going to school, you can be healthy, you can have more time to raise money for your family, you can increase your education. This is how Lifewater started, and this is my connection to Lifewater. This is my brother, Jim. So Jim was a hydrogeologist with the Ministry of the Environment.
Hey, what is that?
What is it's a groundwater specialist. Yeah, so my brother worked in groundwater for the Ministry of the Environment, and he had sort of a life plan, like I'm sure many of us do. So his plan was he was going to work his career, and then when he retired, he was probably going to go overseas and do something good for the world, maybe drill a well or something like that, and then come home. In the early 80s, so he was a young man, like in his early 30s, I'll say, he discovered that he had an eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa. And this is an eye disease that eventually leads to full blindness. And so it was one of those moments where you realize that your life path is really not what you expected, and you need to rethink what you're doing. And he said, you know what, if I'm gonna do something good in this world, I can't wait till I retire. I need to do it now. And so he found a friend with some shared passion, and the two of them went over to Liberia in 1995, so 30 years ago, in the middle of the Liberian Civil War, which was an absolutely brutal time for that country. And their plan was to maybe drill 1 or 2 wells, train some local people there so that the work could continue when they left. So they went over, they drilled their wells, they left, but their hearts were just so touched by what they saw that, as you can imagine, one trip led to another, led to another. And so those first wells were drilled 30 years ago, and at this point, 10 million people have benefited from what started with a plan to just go and drill a well. Unfortunately, my brother passed away suddenly in 2020, just at the beginning of COVID. And this is his wife, Linda Garrels, who, my sister-in-law, she lives and works in Thunder Bay. She's about this high and full of tons of passion and energy, and obviously went through a really difficult time with his passing, but also after decades of traveling overseas with him and working alongside him as a nurse, she was able to keep Lifewater going and keeping that vision going. So we often say Jim was a man who lost his eyesight but had a very clear vision of where things should go, and that vision continues. And so through the support of so many generous donors here in Canada, in the States, even in Europe, Lifewater Canada is now working in 4 countries, so 3 countries in Africa. We work in Liberia, Kenya, and Nigeria, and then we also work in Haiti, and began there in 2010 after the earthquake. And there are really 6 kinds of project types that we do. So we repair hand pumps, we rehabilitate broken wells and drill wells, so that's sort of the water component of the work that we do. We also conduct health and hygiene workshops. We provide dignity kits, so those are the reusable menstrual pads that I was talking about a moment ago, and then build latrines. And so together, that's water, sanitation, and hygiene programming. And you may have seen that before. That's what people call WASH, right? Water, sanitation, hygiene. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what each of these projects actually look like. So repairing broken wells is a really big part of the work that Lifewater does, because as you can imagine, there's no point drilling a well and then a broken well eventually is no kind of solution, right? So maintenance is important and rehabilitation is important. So we repair wells that were drilled by Lifewater teams, but also wells that may have been drilled by other NGOs. Often NGOs go in, they drill a well, they leave. Well, what happens when that well is no longer functioning? So what you see on the left there is a hand pump repair. So what we're installing are your very old-fashioned, sustainable, simple technology hand pump, but it has moving parts, right? There's little O-rings and things that need to be replaced. So repairing hand pumps is a very large portion of the work that we do. For about $140, we can do a repair on a pump and restore safe water to a community. The other picture that you see is what's called a rehabilitation. So there may be a really good borehole, so the well itself, that hole may still have a good source of water at the bottom, but perhaps the inner workings need repair, or the concrete pad that keeps the surface water out perhaps has a lot of cracks and damage and needs to be replaced. So that's a bigger repair, but again, far cheaper than drilling a new well. So repairs are a very important part of what we do. And then, of course, we drill new wells. So they're generally about 100 to 300 feet deep, depending on where we're drilling and what the surface is like and how deep the aquifers are. And when you get down there, there's this amazing water, safe and clean. You put a hand pump on top, seal that with a concrete pad so no surface water gets in, and boy, do you change a community. We drill new wells for places that have never had a well before, and I'll be talking a little bit about that because, as you can imagine, some of the very rural, far-off communities are very difficult to reach. I'll show you some photos of what some of those roads look like. But we also drill wells in communities that maybe don't have enough wells. So if you can imagine a community of 1,000 people, if there's one hand pump, each family needs maybe 3 5-gallon buckets. Maybe it takes 50 pumps to get a bucket. The wear and tear on that well, and as you can imagine, the wait time, it's just not sufficient. So we drill new wells to reach communities that haven't had water before, but also to provide additional wells where they're needed. When I first started traveling around a little bit, talking about Lifewater, I was standing at the front. I thought I was doing a pretty good job, and I said, Lifewater digs new wells, and my sister-in-law, Linda, was at the back doing this. And she said later, Betty-Ann, don't say that we dig wells, because we don't, we drill wells. And she's absolutely right, and what you see here is the difference. So there are many communities that have a hand-dug well, so do they have water? Yes. But as you can see, it's an open source, a shallow source of water. And you can imagine that you combine that with communities who maybe don't have latrines or toilets of any kind. And then you add rainy season into the picture. It's pretty clear to see how a hand-dug well is simply not a safe source of water. So we also build community latrines. And as you can imagine, open defecation is a huge health and hygiene issue. It contaminates water sources. So we try to focus on building latrines in places where there's a really high concentration of people, so schools, community centers, churches, markets. And we teach health and hygiene workshops. So a health and hygiene workshop is an opportunity to share with a community how to take care of your well, how to treat running stomach or diarrhea should it occur. It's a small amount of education that can go a really long way. As I mentioned, Linda Garrels, my sister-in-law, the president of Lifewater, is a nurse, and so she's done many health and hygiene workshops over time and taught many local people how to teach their own people these health and hygiene workshops. One of her workshops really stuck with her because she was teaching the community about the risks of unsafe water. And there was a woman at the back who started to cry. And so Linda went and spoke with her after, like, I'm sorry if I said something wrong, why are you crying? And in that community, there was a tradition that after a baby was a month old, it was the grandmother who would give that child a first spoonful of water. And so 3 of her grandchildren had gotten sick and passed away. And she had that moment where she realized that that spoonful of death had come from her at that moment. So that's the tragic side of that story. The better side is that through the health and hygiene workshop, they learned how to treat running stomach when it occurs. And so when Linda went back a year later and saw the same woman, she was able to, how are you doing? And she said, I've been able to save the lives of other children through the knowledge that I got about how to treat diarrhea when it occurs. So a little knowledge goes a long way, right? Here you also see the sewing of the dignity kits. So this program started in Kenya when we realized that young girls were often still missing time in school because they didn't have sanitary pads. So what you see here are the pads being sewn in Kenya. And so girls are given a package of a few daytime and one nighttime pad. They're reusable and washable, and it allows girls to be in school all month, even when they're on a period. Such a simple solution.
My name is Catherine, and I work with one of Lifewater's partners in Kenya. For most women and girls in Africa, there is a lot of shame around menstruation, which means that people don't talk about this normal bodily process. Girls live with misconceptions, stigma, and a lack of access to the sanitary products they need. They resort to using leaves, old mattresses, or towels, or staying home sitting on sand, feeling shame and isolation during their period. Sometimes sex is even exchanged for the needed sanitary products, resulting in diseases and unwanted pregnancies. Girls miss school and women don't have the opportunity to participate in their communities for a week out of every month. Education and access to the sanitary products can change this. We have been distributing dignity kits to women and girls for the last 2 years and teaching communities about menstruation. We are giving girls the supplies they need and working to erase the stigma, which means girls can stay in school all month. With your support, we are making a difference.
So that's Catherine, who I had the opportunity to meet last spring when I was in Liberia for the first time. And Catherine works with one of our teams in Kenya. And it was a pretty neat opportunity to be able to sit down with another woman and just hear her stories of what a difference something like a menstrual pad can have. It had never crossed my mind that there are women who are staying home sitting on sand. And the idea of sex for pads, I've heard of sex for fish. I had never heard of sex for pads. But there are issues with young girls who have no access and no resources, trading their bodies in return for simple products that they need to manage their menstruation. And so by providing these pads, we've seen a decrease in sexually transmitted disease, we've seen a decrease in unwanted pregnancies, and we've seen an increase in girls being in school all month. So our general approach is a 3-phase approach. So the first part is training and equipping local teams. And this is really important, right? It's not staff from Lifewater Canada going overseas doing work and going back home. It's all about training and equipping people who live in countries to work in their own nations with their own people. And I'm sure we've all heard, you teach him or give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. You teach him to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. That's really what we're talking about, right? So it's local teams working with their own people, but also engaging communities in which they're doing the work. So when we go into a community, community members come forward and they help with some of the physical labor, maybe moving the gravel or bringing some of the water that's needed for the drilling, or providing food and lodging for the workers who are there doing the actual work. So it's local people, local teams, local communities, all doing the work. And then it's donor support here that makes the projects possible. So here in Lifewater Canada, a lot of what we do is exactly what I'm doing here today. We share information about the need and about the work, and we have just this incredible network of donors across Canada, through the United States, a few in Europe, who are providing support on a project-by-project basis. So when a team overseas fixes a pump, they send us a bill for $140 and we send them the funds to cover the work that they're doing on a project-by-project basis as the work is completed. But it really is that ownership that is so important. So what you see here, I heard I have a laser. It's very cool. So this is a person in Liberia holding a certificate. She is a well caretaker. So each community that gets a new well, someone in that community is trained to take care of that well. So sometimes that might mean locking the well when it's not in use so that there aren't children playing with it and sticking things down it. Some of that might mean knowing how to do a really simple repair, or it might mean that that well caretaker can call one of the Lifewater teams when a bigger repair is needed. But again, that's what community ownership looks like, right? And there's a lot of pride in that. So way back in the beginning when we were first starting our work, we often had donors who would come forward and say, you know, I'd like to drill a well in memory of whoever, and can you put a plaque on it? And, well, sure, we can do that. We learned not to do that because the ownership needs to be with the community, not with us as donors here in Canada. So there were a couple of widows who had lost their husbands, wanted to support wells, went overseas to see the wells that they had supported, and a plaque was put on those wells. Unfortunately, about a year later, they started getting phone calls here in Canada from the community, when are you coming back to fix your well? That was a lesson learned for us. So we don't put plaques on wells anymore. We really focus on the ownership needs to be in the country with the community, with the people who are using the well every day. The really neat thing is, over time, what you see here is we've been able to bring teams together from the different countries in Africa, and they're beginning to support each other and train each other. So that's me right there. This is our trip to Liberia in March, and we brought all three teams from all the different countries in Africa together, and they could share information with each other. They could drill together, and it was like, oh, you do it that way. We should try that, right? So they're sharing information and building capacity and needing us a little less. But how cool is that, right? That's what you want. I'm just going to show you our teams very quickly so you get to see the wonderful faces of the people who are doing the work overseas. So we have a team in Haiti, a very small team, but boy, are they doing a great job. Because as you may know, Haiti has been a real mess. There basically is not a functioning government in Haiti right now. These guys work in the Cape Haitian Plains, so sort of the northern part of Haiti, and they've been able to continue working in spite of what's going on. So we're pretty excited about the work that they've been able to continue to do and to grow. So this is not a team that's done any latrine building in the past, but they're gearing up and will have their first latrine built by Christmas, so that's pretty exciting to see. In Kenya, we have 3 teams working in different areas of the country. As you can see, this is our biggest team. They're the ones who started the hygiene kits and the sewing of the kits. Many of these workers in Kenya came from an orphanage and have a long history of poverty themselves. So I guess that's the other ripple benefit, isn't it? That there's really good jobs for people, that they can sustain their own families. This is our team in Nigeria. So 1 team there right now. We're very excited to say that we will be expanding over the coming year, moving into some of the more rural areas of Nigeria. So far a lot of our work has been around Abuja, the capital in Nigeria, but we're sort of targeting the northeast part of the country and getting into some really rural areas where the needs are very, very high. And we have 3 teams in Liberia. So if I'd been here about 6 months ago, I would have said we had 2 teams. But as of March, we launched our 3rd team, and that team is called Lifewater Liberia Rural. And again, this is us moving into the harder areas. When my brother Jim first went to Liberia in 1995, as I said, they were in the middle of civil war. And so really their goal at that time was, how can we help as many people as possible, as quickly as possible? And so a lot of the drilling that they were doing was along the highways and in the really easy to access areas. And so really Lifewater's approach at that time was do the easy ones first, right? The low lane, let's help as many people as possible. And at this point, we're now saying, let's make the hard ones easy. So we've made a lot of progress. We've moved past needing to do the easy ones first, and now it's like, how can we get to the people who haven't had water before? And this is part of the challenge. This is what the roads can look like. Here they're not wet. You can imagine in rainy season what they look like. So clearly, traditionally, if you look at drill rigs here, they're often on a trailer. And I'm sure you can imagine that getting a trailer-mounted rig into areas like this is virtually impossible. So we have some pretty innovative people on our team. Each of our countries in Africa now has a rig that looks like this. So this is the drill rig at the back. You can see the mast there that goes up to do the drilling, and there's a compressor at the front. And so the entire unit is on an Isuzu truck with a fairly narrow wheelbase and four-wheel drive, and it can get into all kinds of places that maybe we couldn't reach before. And so here is that Lifewater Liberia rural team hitting water for the first time last March, which was pretty exciting. We have always worked right here in this area, right around the capital of Liberia, and we said, let's try to get up, way up here into Lofa County. And so that's where that team is drilling. It's a good full day's travel to get up there. It seems kind of daunting, right? How are we going to get teams up there? How are we going to get equipment up there? But you know what? God has really blessed the work. And it was shortly before we launched the team to head up there, a pastor walked into our offices in the capital of Liberia and said, I'm from Venema, way up here, and we could really use a well. And we're like, no kidding, we're trying to get up there and do some work. And so he offered his church compound, so now we have a space to store our trucks and store materials and a place for workers to stay when they go up there. So the blessing was pretty rich to see how that happened just when we needed it most. And this is our newest venture. So this is actually, it's a motorcycle. It's kind of, if you've ever been